Hey guys, it's Ryan here with HobbiesofaMan once again, and today we're going to be doing another anime review. We're going to be looking at Delicious in Dungeon Season 1 of 2, potentially. I don't know how long the series is. I think it has finished in Japan, right? So the manga is done, and Delicious in Dungeon's first season recently ended, like a few weeks ago, right? So I want to talk about it because I really loved it, and I have some interesting tidbits that I think most people probably don't have, which is how I enjoyed this more in the anime than in the manga, right? So I'll talk about that in a bit. But Delicious in Dungeon is a anime series created by Studio Trigger, the major studio that came out of Studio Gainax breaking apart, basically. Although you can say Trigger made it, but my understanding is that there was like a shit ton of different groups that helped make the anime function properly. The way that it does. And you can kind of notice that, where you can see that sometimes the models are slightly different, episode to episode, or even within the episode several times in a row. They're slightly different, right? But it works out really nicely. Everything looks great. It's based on a manga by Ryoko Kui, who is a well-known mangaka and recently has been kind of skyrocketing in popularity as the anime has become more and more successful, right? The series ran from January 4th to June 13th here in the States, and I watched it in June. I can't remember exactly when I started it, but I did watch it like basically a week before the final episode came out, so I was like in the right moment at the right time in the right place to kind of enjoy the whole thing in one go, and it was wonderful. I really liked it. And basically, it's based around this basically Dungeons and Dragons type setting and world, right? However, it's a bit different from your usual, right? Like not every race exists in the same kind of continent, and not everything happens the way that you would expect it to in a normal fantasy world. Basically, the setting is a singular island that has a massive giant dungeon within it that used to be an ancient kingdom, right? And so adventurers and people from all over the place show up to this island to try to, become great adventurers or make money off the dungeon, right? The dungeon or the island is ruled by this guy called the Island Lord, I think. And the dungeon is changing. It's becoming more problematic as the series progresses. So stuff happens, and eventually the elves, which are the ancient custodians of magic in this world, have to show up to see what the fuck is going on, which is where we lead into season 2, right? So basically it's a Dungeons and Dragons world where the kind of interesting tidbit, the change, the difference, the reason why you might want to watch this is because the party that we follow is a bunch of weirdos their leader specifically is a weirdo that is really into monsters, so much so that he wants to eat them the same way that normal humans eat cattle and other farm animals, right? And because these other characters are tied to him by loyalty to him and his sister, who is the character that dies at the beginning, which incites this journey into the dungeon without money, forcing them to eat. Forcing them to eat the monsters. They have to follow in his footsteps and become weirdos that like to eat food from the dungeon, right? So yeah, along their initial delving into the dungeon after this difficulty with the main characters or the party leader's sister dying and them having to resurrect her, they actually end up meeting this dwarf whose name is Senshi. Sorry, I was trying to remember if it was Denshi or Senshi. It's Senshi, who has been living in this dungeon and cultivating this land basically for a long time, right? At least 15 years or something, I think. And so he joins forces with them because he's like interested in other people that are interested in eating food from the dungeon. And so their party grows and they delve deeper and deeper, right? And it's actually a really fun story. It's really enjoyable. It has a lot of heart and a lot of fun, right? Like the most enjoyable part for me is not necessarily the dungeon crawling, the spelunking, right? Or the food, although I really do appreciate the food aspect. My favorite part is the wackiness of all of these characters, right? A lot of people say Laios is some sort of like autistic type character, and I guess technically you could say that, but to me, he doesn't really read as autistic, he reads as socially inept. And those are not really the same thing, right? Especially when there's this moment later on in the season where a character confronts him about the fact that he dislikes that Laios is so nice to him and so interested in him, even though the character has expressed many times that he doesn't want to talk to Laios, right? That he's only interested in Laios' sister or their party dynamic or whatever. And Laios is upset about it. And then the guy is like, dude, you never picked up the signals. And you could argue that that is autistic, right? And the fact that he has like the special interest in monsters can also lead to the fact that he's on the spectrum. But I really didn't really read it that way. I mean, I'm happy that people can read it that way, but to me, it doesn't seem like that's the case, right? But at the same time, I don't know how you could make it clearer without also delving into like, you know, like a caricature, right? So, you know, to me, he doesn't really read as autistic or on the spectrum, but a lot of people seem to agree that he is, right? So it is what it is. So I like this character. I like his obsession with the dungeon. It's funny, it's enjoyable, it's ridiculous. I also really like Marcille for two reasons. First, she's voiced by Emily Rudd, who is the lady that plays Nami in the live action One Piece, which is awesome. And two, I like that she has this really like she has this like vibe to her that's like really fun for two reasons. One, she's kind of like not that expressive in the way that she communicates, right? Because she's like an elf. The way that she speaks is super like, it almost feels monotone, although it's not. And so she's kind of slow compared to everyone else because of her immense lifelong span her immense lifespan makes her so she moves at a different pace from other people. And then her just like insane reactions to eating stuff from the dungeon are hilarious. Like, I really like this character because I like this type of character, right? I like Fierin, I like Marcille, I like you know, the Kudere type characters. And you know, technically I guess Marcille isn't really a Kudere, she has more expressions to her, but she falls more into that like expressionless vibe, right? Chochuk is funny. I like that he's like middle-aged, but because of his race, he just looks like a teenager, and I think that's hilarious. I really enjoy that. I actually really like his like off-standard, like, how do I word this? His prickly nature, his standoffishness is the right word. A lot. I think he's fun, and it really balances out the team where Marcille and Laios are very, you know, willing to interact and do whatever they need to do. Chochuk is willing to do it, but reticent to do so, right? So I like that. And then Senshi is my favorite just because he has that like gentle giant energy, even though he's like a dwarf, right? So I like that. I like all of the characters a lot, right? So that's really what brings me into this story a lot. And it's also why I like the anime better than the manga, because in the manga, the thing that really drove me to continue reading it was the love for food and the care that Senshi shows, right? Like this appreciation for food that I think that here in the States or in the West, we really don't have, right? That Japan seems to highlight a lot, which is this idea that, you know, food is not just for sustenance, it's, you know, a key part of our culture, of our enjoyment of life, of our, you know, identity as humans, you know, a key aspect of our, you know, intelligence or whatever you might want to call that, right? Which is something that I really agree with. I really like taking my time to make my food and really enjoy my food, right? Although I eat pretty fast, I take my time to enjoy my food, which contrasts with my, you know, some other people that I know who just like don't care. They're just like, I don't give a shit. I just need to eat. And it doesn't matter. Whatever I can get is good enough, right? Which I find crazy, right? So In the manga, that's what really drove me to read this, because I wasn't really charmed by the characters in the manga. I think that either because I was reading it, or because of the translation, or because of whatever, the charming aspects of the characters didn't really shine through, right? But in the anime, with the crazy expressions, with the funny voice acting, with the music, the character expression and the character reaction is so strong that it really makes me dive into the series more, right? So I was really drawn in by that. And so I think that ultimately I do like the anime better than the manga, and that goes against everything that I like, because I'm very much of the idea that the source material should be the best version of the story, or it usually is, right? But in this case, I can't say that that's true. I really do think that the anime is a superior format for the story compared to the manga, which sucks, because it goes against everything I believe in, but at the same time, it's a wonderful story. It's a wonderful series. You definitely should watch it, right? So, yeah. I watched it in English. I thought it was great. I really like the ridiculous expressions to the characters here. It reminds me of Konosuba. And that's probably the best part of Konosuba, right? So the fact that was added into a story that's much better, like Delicious in Dungeon, was great, right? So that's really all there is to say. I mean, it's not really a review. It's more like a discussion, but I'll call it a review just for continuity's sake on the channel. I like the story. I thought it was really fun. It's really accessible. I like the English dubbing. And I would rate this like a 4.5 out of 5. Like, there's some issues with it, but mostly that's just because I don't think that the story manages to be all that interesting for very long when you're still in the initial phase of the, just going through the dungeon and eating different things, right? And that comes from the manga specifically, but it still kind of lingers in the anime until you get to the point where they fight the dragon, and then the story changes, because this leads to a connection to something else that leads to expanding the world, right? So about halfway through the anime, the story changes and grows beyond the initial setup. And at that point, it's really great and really interesting, right? But before that, I think that it loses points for me, because even though I really appreciate all of that stuff conceptually, it can be a bit tedious or lacking or boring to get through if you're not deeply invested in one of the aspects of the story, right? So I think that there could have been some work done there to make it tighter and to make it more concise so that it was faster. But that's an issue that I see for other people, not necessarily an issue that I had, but that looking at the story kind of like objectively, I think it is a reason why I should dock points for it, right? So 4.5 out of 5, 9 out of 10 if you want to look at it that way. That's my rating for this. I think it's amazing. It's up there with Fierin and Ranking of Kings for me, which is awesome. I really love these types of like slightly different fantasy stories, right? So that's all there is to say. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you thought. Thank you guys so much for watching, and see you guys later.